Hi, folks. Good afternoon. Hope everybody is healthy, doing well, and that you've been able to make the most of the summer. My name is John Diamond. I'm the president and the CEO of the University of Maine Alumni Association, and we're glad to have you joining us today. Our topic is Black Bear football, and our guest is the head coach of the program, Nick Charlton. The postponement or cancellation of the fall season, as most people know, was announced a few weeks ago, and it is yet one more consequence of the pandemic. Today, we're going to talk with Coach Charlton about the impact of the postponement of the season on the team and on the program. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the issues and opportunities that might lie ahead for Black Bear football. We'd like to hear from you and get your questions. And if you'd like to submit a question, just simply take a look at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the little cartoon speaking bubble. That's the chat button. If you would like to submit a question, just click on that, type in your question, and hit enter or return on your keyboard. And we'll get to as many questions as possible during the time we have available. We're recording this session so that folks who couldn't join us live today will be able to watch it. So it will be available on the Alumni Association's website, which is UMaineAlumni.com. A little bit of background about Coach Charlton. He joined UMaine a little more than 5 years ago in March of 2015. He started as the football program's wide receivers coach, and then a year later took on some additional responsibilities as coach of special teams. He took over as the offensive coordinator of the program in 2018, which was a great year for UMaine football. And he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And as most of you know, if you are football fans, that was the year that the Black Bears won the Colonial Athletic Association championship. And we made it to the Final Four of the football championships subdivision semifinals, or of the finals rather, made it to the semifinals. Nick was named head coach shortly after Coach Joe Harasimiak took a position at the University of Minnesota, and Nick was the hands-down choice of university fans as well as the administration to take over and succeed Joe. Nick earned his undergraduate and graduate degrees at Boston College, and he resides in Bangor with his wife and children. So with that, welcome, Coach. So glad you're able to join us. How are you adjusting to an August that's unlike anything you've experienced since you started coaching or playing football?
It's certainly been interesting. And John, I appreciate you having me on and everybody for joining the call. And I'm going to try to do my best to answer and update everybody as best as possible, just on what's going on with our program. And it's definitely been a very different August for us, and just adapting to the postponement of our schedule. And of course, this will be the first time that we are looking at a spring schedule. So it's certainly been a little bit different. Our players have been great throughout the process. It's been a lot of adversity that they've faced, even from March leaving campus to being at home for so long, and then hoping to be back right now. We would have had our first practice a couple of days ago, and now we're looking forward to restructuring our year a little bit and looking at different ways that we want to do that. And I think we've already started to formulate a strong plan to do that. And a lot of the conversation that's going on right now nationally is very broad and doesn't really have a lot of detail, but we're trying to be very detailed and anticipate what we think is going to happen nationally. So in terms of our guys and our players, I think they've reacted really well. It's certainly been a difficult and different process. This is my first August, not in a football camp in a very long time. So, there's been positives and negatives to that, but at the same time, the adversity that we're facing is part of life. And I know this is a different and a difficult situation for everybody, but our guys have handled it really well, and the staff has done a good job. So we're working through it, and we expect everybody back here in a couple of weeks, and we'd like to start workouts shortly after that. So in terms of August, it's certainly been a little bit different, but we're making the best of it.
Step back just a little bit. When the decision was made by the conference to postpone the season, what was the protocol you had in place for letting your players know, breaking the news to them?
Well, it was, to be transparent, it was a difficult time because, A, it's disappointing news. B, we all found out on Twitter. So somebody leaked it the night before, and again, just being transparent. And that was how everybody found out. The following day, Ken Ralph, our AD, had a meeting with the team and addressed the rumors that they were true. And then I had a team meeting that weekend, of course, having individual conversations in between, but was able to speak to the team and address questions and kind of what's actually going on and what was real shortly after that. It was difficult because throughout this process, I've tried to, and my staff has, to be extremely transparent with our players and families about what was going on and what was real and the best ways to deal with being at home and anticipating a season. And to find out that way wasn't really great, but we did try to make the very best of it. And so I think the guys at first were, of course, very, very disappointed. Ultimately, and I'm sure this is going to come up, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to play college football this fall. So I certainly understand and support our position and what we're doing as a university. But I mean, I'm the football coach, and our football players were certainly disappointed because they all want to play. But that was a tough weekend for everybody, but we dealt with it. And, we have a great group of men in that locker room. And I think that weekend everyone was disappointed, and then we just had to move on in the most positive way we could.
You've got players back on campus now. You were saying earlier about 20 or so, and then the rest of the team will be arriving by the time classes start in 2 or 3 weeks. What is their routine right now? Are they working under the direction of the coaching team, the trainers? How is that working out?
So we've been in a voluntary stage since I believe it was June 18th. And so guys were working out outside with Coach Lynch, our strength coach, and then the athletic trainers. And now we're transitioning. We're still in voluntary mode, but we've moved inside. So now we can use the weight room. It's limited numbers in there. It's 12 and less right now. The coaches are, as of this past Monday, allowed to be in there. So we're able to interact with our players again, which is really exciting because this is the longest I haven't been around these guys and seen them in forever. So to just even be able to see them is a pleasure, and it's been really, really nice. But we're transitioning in the next couple of weeks from moving to voluntary to obviously when they get back to working full-time with them. And as of right now, they're lifting 3 times a week under the program that we have. We also have the ability to go outside and work conditioning, do those type of things. But just recently, our coaching staff has been able to be involved with them. But so far, it's been our strength coaches that have predominantly been working with them. And that's been an NCAA rule and then a university rule as well up until this point.
When you have the full team back and school's underway, what will the semester be like for them in terms of their workout routines, the number of hours they're putting in? How will that, obviously it will differ because they're not preparing for game day.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a little bit different. And the way that we're trying to model it is, it's very early, is basically take the spring ball that we lost and move it to the fall. And so the way that I see it is I don't plan on us practicing in September because I think we need the time to evaluate physically and mentally where our guys are at. They've been gone for a long time, and we want to start with workouts and smaller group activities and then transition to this, fall ball type schedule. And I think there's really two sides of the coin. If we don't practice, we will have gone a full calendar year without a practice. And that's a pretty startling stat when you think about it. So I think the CAA in general is looking to recreate spring ball in that fashion. I think it'll probably start in October for us. It's early to say that. It also depends on some of the government restrictions that we have because naturally we have, 100 plus players and staff on the team, and we're limited to only a certain amount of guys outside at a time. So we're waiting to see how that's going to progress. But I plan on it being workouts initially, smaller group workouts and field work, and then transitioning to practice. And my biggest thing is trying to time it up so that we get the work in that we need to, and then there's enough time of essentially what would be another off season before playing a spring schedule. So I think it gives them a little bit of a carrot at the end to say, all right, hey, we have a plan. This is something we can look forward to, and really give them structure to make it worth it to come back.
what will what happens in the spring, if assuming we have a spring season, then you have fall coming up. What complications are created both for the players as students and for the program having basically two seasons within a few months of each other?
I mean,
I know it's uncharted territory, but
yeah, this is my first pandemic, but it's certainly a daunting task. But basically, how I feel about it is, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to find out whether there's going to be an FCS championship or not, and that's going to get ruled on as teams continue to cancel or not. And I think if we are able to be unified in our approach, that's going to really make things better for everybody, because we'll be able to schedule this thing and work out the kinks, because there's going to be a number of them. My personal opinion, I've already shared this with our players, and we are going to be asking our players for their opinion, because at the end of the day, our players are our most important commodity in this program. They're number one for us. And we say that whether it's good times or bad. I always think I'm a decent coach, but you win games with your players. And that's what I really believe in. And I think that we need to start early in the semester. I think starting too early up here, of course, is unrealistic just with the weather and the climate. But I do think we need to start either at the end of February or into March. I think we need to be done by the end of April or the very, very beginning of May. That's my stance on it. It's very, very early. I've kind of been opinionated about it in the beginnings of the process, but Ken and myself are on the same page with this, because essentially any model that goes into late May or June, that is not advantageous or safe for the players, because we can't ask players to play a full schedule in the fall and then what is close to a full schedule in the spring and say that's safe. That's unrealistic to me, and I would have a hard time telling their families that that's the best option for them. So for me, it's about playing a truncated schedule, hopefully 8 games, 9 games, with a championship, whether it's a national championship or a CAA championship, because ultimately that makes it worth it for the guys to participate in. I don't think 6 games and no championship is really worth it. Again, this is all early conversation, but I think there does need to be a championship. I think it needs to start early, and I think it needs to be separated enough from the fall in order for both to work. I do think both can work. I do. There are challenges that go along with that. I'm well aware of them, and I think everybody is. The more teams and conferences we get on the same page, I think we can make this as safe as possible for our players.
How will eligibility be affected by the postponement of the fall season? Both you have the issues of eligibility and also scholarships availability.
Well, for us, it's really only applicable to the seniors, because there'll be individual situations whether guys want to participate in the spring or not, and that's going to be something we're going to have to look at depending on what the schedule is. Now, I've already told our players, if this is happening and there's a championship, that means that either the majority or all of the teams have postponed their schedule, and so we can all get on the same page. So to me, I think that stuff's going to get figured out. I really do. But in terms of eligibility, that's going to be a real season if we are able to do it. If not, and we had to move to the following fall, that wouldn't affect anyone's eligibility. They would maintain that, and it would actually be good for the guys academically, because they would still be able to go through the year but maintain that year of eligibility. Now, our guys want to play. So at the end of the day, they are open to this schedule as long as it fits really the safety and everything and the health of them, which I'm completely behind. Scholarship-wise, it only affects the seniors, because we have to make decisions about how we want to bring guys back. We graduate players in December and May. So we've had a number of guys that were supposed to be graduating in December that we are now planning on bringing back. I've already told the team we are honoring all scholarships through the spring. In the following fall, if we were to have to postpone all the way there, I would probably have to make some decisions on some of the seniors that would want to come back. But I don't anticipate that being very, very difficult, because we don't have a lot of graduates on our roster. So what do I mean by that? The number of grad transfer potentials that we have on our roster is very limited right now. Most of the guys have not graduated yet. So right now it's in their best interest to continue playing at the University of Maine. And that's really the safest and best option for them. Now, there's going to be transfer rules that are going to be coming into effect in January, realistically, that are going to change that a little bit. But as of right now, it actually really doesn't have too much of an effect on our roster because we're a pretty young, experienced, talented roster. Sophomores and juniors make up the majority of our guys that have played a lot of football. Our seniors certainly are very, very important, have a heavy impact. We have a former captain on there. I mean, we got a former All-Americans. We have big players in that class that we need to protect as well. But the majority of our team that has played are sophomores and juniors.
How will this how will the pandemic affect recruiting, both of the practicalities of recruiting when you can't travel like you normally would? Are there NCAA waivers that are being considered to make it easier for coaches to maintain relationships with recruits and during a time when they can't physically go visit them or their families?
I mean, they continue to come out with legislation, but everything's online right now. And it's actually forced us to be very creative in how we want to address the recruits and their families. And there are some things, and a lot of coaches have said this, but it's real. There's a lot of things that we've taken from this and we will continue to do after this is over. I keep saying that whoever invested in Zoom 6 months ago has made a lot of money for themselves, but we use it very predominantly throughout all of our conversations. We've put together virtual official visits. We've used it to a very serious extent. And I think that's one way that you can connect. For us, getting guys up on campus is critical. In the last 5 years, we've kind of gone through it. We have an 85% rate of signing guys if they visit. And I'm talking official visits. So we wouldn't be doing that right now anyway. But, come this winter, that's certainly going to matter. I think in the here and now, the way it's been affecting us is we haven't had camps because it's a dead period through the end of August. I could completely see that getting pushed continuously further, which, again, I would probably agree with. But right now, we can't go to camps. We can't do anything like that. So we've had guys sending us videos, essentially doing camp drills, and we've been very organized about how to do that along with their game film. The thing that's going to get tricky, and this is for everybody, the one positive thing is everybody's dealing with this, is there's going to be a large number of student athletes in the 2021 class that will not be having a senior year, or it'll be moving to the spring. So that is certainly going to affect some things, but we have to rely on our evaluations. We've always done that at the University of Maine long before I got here, with Coach Cosgrove and his staff. It's always been heavy about trusting your evaluation, seeing a guy in person if you can, especially at a camp. We're doing it in a virtual fashion right now. And then hopefully moving to be able to see these guys on the road when we go out recruiting once we're allowed to do that. So the one thing I'll say is it's been a little more difficult. Everybody's doing the same thing. So as long as the playing field is level, to me, we have to adapt and we have to make it work to the best of our ability.
You mentioned recruiting and being on the road and the advantages of or the high rate of signings you get for students who come and do their first visit, their official visit on campus. You said 85%. People like to talk about the downside of Maine football in terms of our geographic proximity, remoteness, relative rural nature of the area, but there are also some attributes that players who come to Maine from out of state especially find attractive. Can you talk about what those attributes are and what resonates with the prospects that you're trying to recruit?
Well, I mean, people throw around like terms like family and relationships and people, and ultimately what, gets guys to commit to any school. That is 100% our biggest selling point. And the relationships that are built here, the guys on our team all have very similar missions. A lot of them come from very similar backgrounds. A lot of guys are trying to get away from whatever their situation is. So the University of Maine being a little more remote, again, gives them a little more focus in terms of academics and then football wise, because we are the farthest north team in our conference and I think anywhere. So for us, that gives them a lot more focus that way, but it's the relationships, getting our guys around our players. Once I talk to a family or parents of a young man and they see who's on our roster and they see that they're from all over the place, they're from similar places that they are, that creates familiarity. And then developing those relationships is really important. Do we have a tougher time here? Do we have to work a little bit harder? Yeah, I would be remiss to say that we don't. because we're geographically a little bit more isolated. And so naturally we have to outwork some people in recruiting in order to beat like schools. And I think that recruiting is the number one priority of the staff. It's the lifeblood of this program. It's something that I think we've done pretty well recently. That's led to some of the success. And I mean, that goes back a long way too, just with the model of how we recruit up here. So I think it is the relationships. I think it is some of the remoteness of the location and guys being very, very focused. Our guys love football. Our guys love football. That's one of the first questions we always ask. And we have to let them know that the focus up here is academics and it's football. It's a state school. There's always going to be things to do. There's going to be parties. There's going to be things like that. But at the end of the day, you have to be focused on getting a degree and you have to be focused and love football. If you don't, it's probably not going to work out. So we have to do a really good job in recruiting, identifying that really, really early.
Do you anticipate that your players will take a somewhat heavier load academically in the fall because they're not going to be preparing at the same levels and putting as much time in preparing for weekend games?
We're basically just flipping the fall and the spring. So we're going to add a class. So typically, there's a few different ways we do it, but you can put them in 4 or 5 classes. We're probably going to up it to that 5, treat it like an off season, try to be able to be a little more focused in that direction and then lessen it in the spring. So we're essentially just flipping it. That's all it is. We're definitely going to be very, very involved as a staff. Throughout this whole pandemic, we've been extremely involved with our academic advisors, and they've done a great job working with our student athletes. But I joke, but I think we're probably the only coaching staff in America that hosted study halls on Zoom in April. And we did that with Kristen and Jess and Ann upstairs. They've done a great job all working together with these guys. So I think that we'll probably just flip the schedule. Do I think it'll be a little bit of a challenge? A lot of people don't realize this, but when you're actually in season, guys tend to do better academically because there's a routine that's very, very strict. And there's certainly, I guess, an onus that's put on it regardless of football. And when you get in the off season, sometimes you have to motivate a little bit more. I don't really see that being a problem because we've been away from each other for so long that the guys want to come back. They want to come back. They want to go to class. Some of it's going to be online. Some of it's going to be in person. But the message I keep getting from our guys is honestly, they want to be back and they want to get around each other.
You mentioned academics. Was it this past academic year your team set a collective record for highest GPA by any UMaine football team?
Yep. Yeah, we were very fortunate that the guys were really committed. To be transparent, some of that had to do with the pass-fail option, but a lot of that had to do with the guys continuing to work through a very difficult and adverse time. And I'm really proud of the staff, our academic staff, and then number one, our players for finding a way through that, really exceeding expectations that way. I mean, it's by far the highest GPA we've ever had here. I believe the highest one after that was a 2.9. It was a 3.26. So no matter what, now the bar is set really high, so that's on me now. But I certainly am very, very pleased with what they were able to accomplish this spring.
Yeah, just to clarify for everybody's benefit, the university-wide established a pass-fail policy for this past semester recognizing that students were working remotely and under unusual circumstances. So it wasn't just for the football team, it was campus-wide. So good. You've got a lot of former Black Bears who are in the NFL and CFL. Have you been hearing from them at all about their concerns for UMaine football or their own concerns about their own careers?
Yeah, I've had conversations with a number of guys that either I worked with directly or some of our older players. I've actually talked to a few guys that played here 20 and 30 years ago that have called me just that want to know what's going on. And there's a lot of questions, and there are no bad questions. I mean, again, this is unprecedented times, but in terms of the guys that are currently playing right now, I think I've talked to every single one of them in the NFL and the CFL. Their concerns are very, very serious for what they're doing, at their level. And then, of course, they want to know what's going on with us. And I'm really saying the same things and trying to be very, very authentic about what our approach is going to be, because it's a major question about playing in the spring and doing that. But it's something that we think we can do safely and put together in a very intelligent fashion. So it's mostly about that. It's about how the guys have been dealing with it. And then we really talk about what they've been going through too. The guys up in the CFL right now, they don't know if they're going to have a season. It's looking unlikely. And so I'm feeling for a lot of those guys because, those are guys that played for me and I coached. And then in the NFL, they're anticipating playing, but there's certainly question marks about that too. So it's good to have those conversations, a little bit of a give and take just about everybody's situation because right now everything's up in the air.
I want to remind everybody that if you have a question for Coach Charlton, please just type it into the chat bubble on the bottom of your screen and we will get to that. I want to ask you a bit about the financial effects of the pandemic on your program now. For better or worse, there are programs that are still pushing to play because there's a lot of money at stake, both in terms of ticket revenue and TV revenue. The UMaine program doesn't have the benefits of that nor the liabilities that go along with it. You want to talk about the financial impact of the pandemic on your program?
Yeah, it's really twofold in that we are saving a lot of money because, we're not traveling. We save a large sum of money just by not hosting the players this summer. And then going into the season, there's going to be a lot of expenses that we don't incur because of that. On the flip side, we're one of a few revenue sports here. We are the largest team at the University of Maine with the largest staff. So it's really a little bit of a give and take. There's going to be some expenses that we no longer have, which is great. But at the same time, we lost our 2 guarantee games, which I know everybody knows how important those are. That's a very large sum of money for the athletic department. But one thing, and Ken's done a good job of kind of explaining this to a lot of different people, we don't really have a lot of debt, and we don't have a student fee here at the University of Maine. So we haven't had to pay anybody back really. And a lot of other schools that are in positions to push to play or in our position right now are dealing with the fallout of that right now and having to pay students back. We are fortunate that we're not in that situation and we really haven't incurred too much debt. So there will be a financial impact. We're not selling tickets to games right now. Our TV contract with Flow Sports is certainly, in flux because we're not playing any games, but we are anticipating moving to the spring. So hopefully we can get that organized depending on how this is going, and hopefully we start to move in a positive direction nationally, because that's really what ultimately the issue is here. And that will really dictate us being able to get some revenue going again for the sport and the University of Maine in general.
I'm sure you're aware, as are most Mainers, that the pool of high school football players has shrunk considerably as programs are shifting, either no longer offering football programs, or the interest in playing football has shrunken over time. How is that a factor, or how does that factor into your own approach and your coaching staff's approach to recruitment, both in state and out of state?
Well, out of state, it stays the same. We have our recruiting areas that we all focus on, and that's business as usual. In terms of the state, Joe put it in a few years ago where we split the state up with every single member of the staff. And I thought that was really important because it really put emphasis on the state. And naturally, every year I've been here and from having conversations with coaches and administrators, there's always going to be a thought and a feeling of, hey, why don't you have more Maine guys? Why don't you take these guys at your program? And I take a lot of pride in being able to have the best players in Maine on our roster. Last year we had 17, and that's probably the highest there's been in over a decade here, I would imagine. And that varies from scholarship to walk-on players. So to me, we've certainly put an emphasis on it. If you're at the top of the list in Maine and you're a high-level player, we want you to play at the University of Maine. And that's something I think we've handled very, very seriously. Our staff takes it very seriously in terms of their areas and how we split up the state. In terms of people dropping football or 8-man football, things like that, there's definitely an effect. But the guys that we are going to be recruiting, they're going to find a way to play. So no matter what, we're going to be able to get film on them. We're going to be able to evaluate them. Unfortunately, this year we couldn't do it in camp, which is usually really big for us. But we've already been evaluating and been in communication with some of these guys, and hopefully we can have them up in the spring for some games, because that's always a big part of it too. But we put a big emphasis on it, honestly. And there's always going to be people that think you should take more, or have a different approach or whatever it is. But I know we're doing our very best in recruiting to recruit the state of Maine, and we want to take the top student athletes and keep them here at the University of Maine. That's certainly been a priority when Joe took over and when I moved into this role. It's continued to be a very big priority.
Could you describe what areas of the country you have found has been particularly productive for UMaine football? Just looking at the incoming players for this year, I know you had several from Pennsylvania, but could you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and a lot of that has to do with the large number of the population, number one, but high school talent in the area, high school programs, the DMV, so down a little bit more south in the DC area and Maryland and Virginia, along with Delaware and that whole stretch right there. We've recruited that very, very heavily, and that's actually the numbers are going up down there as well because we've really put a large focus on that area. And it's really about developing those relationships too. Like Mike Ryan and Pat Deneke, two of our assistant coaches, they've been recruiting Pennsylvania for a long time. And so they have relationships there, and that allows us to kind of sort through a lot of things and find out who is going to be a great prospect for the University of Maine. And Pat also has done a good job up in Canada, where we have the largest international number of players in the whole country, all of Division I on our roster. We have 3 from Europe, and then I believe it's 6 right now from Canada. So, and some of them are, all-American type players. So we've kind of spread out in that direction a little bit too, but Jersey has been a big one in New York. And one big area that I felt like we needed to do a better job in, and I'm a Mass guy, so I'm a little bit biased, but we need to do a better job in New England. And we have a few players from different spots, but we want to take the best players from New England in general and compete against the people that we play against in the region, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and people like that, for those players. So I actually moved Justin Flores, who was our recruiting coordinator. He played here. He actually played for me in 2015 when I was the wideouts coach. I moved him back to New England because I thought it was really, really important that we put more of an emphasis on that area, and he's done a great job with that. But we cover most of the East Coast, honestly, and we have guys from all over the place. I mean, we have a wideout from California. A year ago, we had an O-lineman from Texas. We get guys from all over the place, but it's predominantly that sector of the country.
Mm-hmm. We have a question that came in, excuse me, asking about the diversity of your team. I'm reading it now, and the importance of teams, just in terms of land grant, I want to make sure I interpreted this correctly. I think it's a 2-part question asking about the diversity of your team and what that means, especially in these times where there's so much talk about social justice and injustice right now. How has that affected the team, both its dynamic and the mentality of your student athletes as they're taking part both in a time of a pandemic, but also in a time of social unrest?
Well, it's certainly been a big topic of conversation, and especially at the beginning of everything with the Black Lives Matter movement, and then also, at the time, a lot of the protests, that was really all we talked about. We weren't really covering any football for a very long period of time. And my message to the team in terms of how we wanted to go about having conversations and then working towards real change is, authentic change, because conversation is the starting point, but we want to make sure that we're making an impact. I really wanted the opportunity to do that in person. And we've had Zoom meetings, and again, we spent a very long time talking about this very important issue. But I'm excited to get our guys back in person because this is a very, very serious and sensitive topic. And we've done it on Zoom. We've had these meetings, and they were very productive. They were tense at times, and guys really were being very authentic about their experiences. Again, I'm a white male, and I have a lot to learn too, but I've been a part of this program for a long time. This program is 70% Black on average since I've been here. It's certainly a different dynamic than a lot of some of the programs or the general population on campus. We take a lot of pride in that. And we take a lot of pride in the diversity that we have on this team. And I'm here to protect our players. And right now, it's probably a movement that is probably coming a little later than it should have, in my opinion. But the fact that right now there's such an onus on it and attention is something that we do want to capitalize on. But one of the things that our players have talked about, and I think it's important to say, is, yes, we do have the largest number of every type of minority on this campus, but that doesn't put the responsibility on them in order to start to spread a message. We have a platform to do that, and we want to go about it the right way. And we've been really talking about authentic ways to do that. And I think that that's been a huge topic of conversation. Do I think that we have a very specific role to do that? I do. I do, because of the nature of the state with some of the percentages of the population, but also these guys are human beings, and some of the experiences, especially on some of these calls that we had that lasted very long times, were very eye-opening, very difficult, very emotional, and they're not things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I'd be remiss to say that that didn't have a major impact on me. And I've been around these guys for a long time and deal with them every day, but we're looking forward to getting back in person and continuing these conversations and having conversations about like real change and real action, because I think we're at that point, and I'm excited to get them back in person, because it's good to do on Zoom and have these conversations or on the phone, but it is helpful to be able to do this in a team setting or a position group setting and talk about it in person, because it's an issue that resonates everywhere in this country and in the world. But it's certainly in our little bubble up here is very, very specific to our football team and very, very important. And it's something I take very seriously.
And it seems that the conversation is an important part of the overall educational, the development of all students, not just your student athletes. It just happens that you have student athletes who are in a better position to address some of the real life issues that they have faced and others have faced that otherwise might not be attended to, I would think.
Right. I mean, I think like something as simple as, and I'll use a specific example, like if I were to get pulled over, you know, my feelings and my thoughts are a lot different than a lot of my players. And to me, just that simple fact in a very small way is just enough for me to say, okay, this is something that we really need to have a conversation about, because this does impact daily life. And for anybody who's been on this call that played here or has those relationships, it's true everywhere. It's an issue everywhere. And I just think it's something that certainly goes beyond just our football team, but I think it's a major topic, and it's something that we're not just going to let float away, because it has to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. And it appears that you and the other coaches too across other UMaine sports teams have all been pretty outspoken and supportive of your players on this topic, at least following the things that I've seen on Twitter from you and the other coaches and the other programs.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry, John. I support my players. That's how I am. I have my players back, my staff back. Like that's how I feel about the issue. And you know, there's always going to be things you deal with on a day-to-day basis with a team of 100 plus guys, but I back my players, and you know, I try to run the program in the best fashion that I think will help us win and better their lives. And ultimately, right now, this is a very contentious issue, and I know that there's a lot of different directions that it's taken people in, you know, along with the pandemic, honestly. But at the end of the day, I'm here to represent my players and to take care of them and to make sure that they're living their lives the right way. And that's really, honestly, that's my number one job. And we're here to win football games, but especially right now, I was just on the phone with a parent a few minutes ago before this call. I can't say I've been watching a lot of film recently, and I would really like to be doing that. I miss that. I miss football a lot. But my job right now is to make sure everybody's mental health is improving as we look to get guys coming back to campus, and to take care of them in terms of just their general safety and health as we move to get guys back.
Very good. A reminder, folks, about the offering your questions to Coach Charlton through the chat button. We've got a couple here that came in. Somebody's asking, is it realistic to think that we would have football in March in Maine?
I mean, here's the best thing I can say for anybody that remembers. Again, I was the offensive coordinator in 2018, but we played Jacksonville State. They came up here. It was December 1st. I remember it really well. They came out on the field during pregame warmups, and they had their shirts off. You know, they're from down in Alabama, and they were walking around as if the cold didn't bother them. And for anybody that watched that game, the cold didn't bother us. So there's definitely going to be something with that. But if anybody's built for it, it's our guys. And we invite. I will be pushing for any home games that we can get in that climate. And Do I think it's realistic? I think February is not. I think that's just a little bit of a stretch. But as we move into March, I moved spring ball up a week last year when I took over as head coach. We practiced on that first day. I think it was March 24th, and it was pretty cold out. But our guys are built for it, and that's really the best thing I could say about that.
Mm. Other than the weather being a competitive advantage in certain situations, what else does the program need to do to be nationally competitive, like it has been in the last few years, but to be able to sustain that?
Well, any program in general needs to continue to have the support, from the outside community, and then also the investment from, the administration in terms of the needs to remain nationally competitive. And one of the big things that I've obviously openly talked about is, how do we move this program from every couple of years to having great years, whether they're, one of the best years in program history or winning a CAA title or making it to the playoffs, versus every year competing in that aspect. And, I think we saw last year, obviously we got a little banged up, especially early, and we fought back. I was very proud of our team winning 4 out of our last 5. But it's a challenge here. And that's something that hasn't necessarily happened consistently in terms of being a nationally competitive team. And I think that takes an investment from the university and then also the people in the community as well. And, I take a lot of that on me, to be very frank. It's my job to recruit players that are going to fit our culture and are great players as well. We need to have a great staff here, which I believe that we do. And ultimately, we put the best product on the field that we can. There are challenges up here. I think everybody on this call probably knows what a lot of them are, whether it's geographic or budgetary or what have you. But we don't really make any excuses in this program. And my goal is to make this program competitive and make the playoffs every year. That's what we want to do. We want to compete for CAA titles every year. And that's a tremendous challenge. There's a lot of things that we have to work through and fight through. But in order to sustain that takes long-term investment. But it also takes, a lot of groundwork by the people that are directly involved with the program. And that's something that I take very seriously in my role.
Mm-hmm. When we had, a few weeks ago, we had our athletics director, Ken Ralph, on, and he was talking about the need for facility upgrades across campus for a variety of sports. Do you want to talk a bit about what football needs in order to address some of the shortcomings there?
Our number one need is a new turf. That is our number one need by far. It exceeds everything else. I've had a number of conversations with Ken. We're completely aligned and in the right direction with that. The conversations are continuing with some of the groups that really help us out and have been very, very involved, including the Alphons, in order to get that. That's really the biggest thing. I see that happening very, very soon. I really do, because it is very critical to our success. I mean, that's where we play. That's where we practice. And that's the number one investment, I would say. And then we're starting to move, more towards the indoor facility and the long-term stuff, the improvements to the locker room, things like that. And I do every little thing that I possibly can, along with the administration, to improve the daily lives of our players. And that's really been the emphasis of what we do. But in terms of, facilities investments, it certainly starts with the turf. And then it moves inside to, our football building that we are looking to have in the coming years, but also just what we have right now with the locker room, the weight room, and really just the general surroundings our players are in every day.
How does Maine's facilities compare, with the others in the CAA?
We're behind in a lot of areas, to be frank. I think we're comparable to a number of schools, but then there's also a disparity with some other ones. And for anybody that's traveled to different games or things like that, it's different really in every component of our facility, whether it be the turf or the locker room or whatever it is, whether it's comparable or it's behind. But, we're probably somewhere in the middle to behind other schools, if I'm being transparent. But, I know that Ken and our administration has worked and been working very hard on making those improvements that we all know we need and that are going to be a big part of sustaining success, because recruiting is ultimately how you win, and bringing in the right people and the right fit, and obviously good players. But you need a few things sometimes in between to be able to get those guys to come up to the University of Maine. And so that's probably where we're at in terms of the CAA. But, that's not really what this place has been built on. We're working to improve those things. That's a huge thing that's always on my mind. And I know Ken's. So it's an active project that we take very, very seriously, especially in the last year working with Ken. But it's definitely a work in progress.
So much of what you have to do as the head coach is not just dealing with your student athletes, but dealing with fans and donors and university administrators. When you don't have a fall football season, how do you offset that how do you engage with the fan base in a way to keep their support strong or to grow their support?
Well, I think one of my other jobs as the head coach is being a promoter of the program. And especially at a place like the University of Maine, that's really one of the bigger jobs that I have. So, obviously with the postponement of the season and then moving through August, it's been one of those times we've had to work through a lot with our team very specifically. But when we get to the fall and we start to resume workouts and practice, Tyson's team of media relations and the guys that have been working, they do a top-notch job of just getting out videos and content and working with me. And I can be difficult sometimes because I always want to push content, but they've done a great job just, adhering to that and pushing that. We want to engage with our fan base. And one of the biggest things too that I've talked to Seth Woodcock about and some other guys is just about creating more of a connection with our UMaine football alums. And that's something that I've always felt could be improved. And that's a big area that I've been trying to address slowly. And I think now that we're transitioning to a time where obviously we're not playing, it's something that I want to put a lot of attention on. And so to me, there's creative ways you can do that, whether it's on social media or what have you. But for our practices and what we're going to be doing, we want access. We want people to be at that. And we always try to generate as much buzz around that as we can. I think every little thing matters. As the head coach or whatever my position would be in this program, every little thing matters. And right now my job is to promote this program. And I think it's really important. So we're going to have to be creative about how we do it, but we have the people to do it.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk, we have a question that came in asking about what kind of efforts the program does to engage youth football in the state, school visits, team members going to hospitals, the things that we often hear about. Can you talk about the kinds of activities that both you as coaches and your players engage in order to work with the community and become more involved?
Well, the big event every year is always Meet the Bears, and that's a big event that's been going on here for a long time. At the end of August, and when we try to get as many of the local youth programs or just anybody who wants to come to hang out with our players and be around them. That's probably our premier event. In terms of outside of that, Sam Lenson, who was a former player here, and he worked with me. I brought him back as a special teams quality control for us last year. He organized a number of trips to local schools where our guys were able to interact with middle school and elementary school students. Did a great job with that. That was a big thing that we did weekly here. I was really proud of that effort. One thing that my wife and I have been working on and looking to really ramp up is it's an important issue to me is mental health. And that's something that's kind of a work in progress right now. So I couldn't really give too much information on that, but that's an issue that's very important to me. And I think it's something that's going to be very relevant to the youth of Maine. And so that's something that we've been looking at getting more involved in. Aside from just your programs where you go out to schools and you visit kids, or a hospital, those type of programs are great and they're impactful and they're very important. But it's something that we've been exploring because that's a topic that's very important to me personally, and with our players. So that's a direction that we plan on going in. But we try to be very involved, and our administration does a great job too, just inviting these guys to games and getting them on the field and having kids show up with their uniforms. And I think any kind of community involvement we can have is really important. We want this to be a welcoming place, and having the state of Maine be behind the flagship university and the only Division I program in the state, it's really important. And we continue to do a good job. I think we can do a better job. And I also think that's part of my task as the head coach.
Mhm. Your mention of mental health, obviously it's a topic that everybody is dealing with because of the pandemic, as well as the normal strains of life. I suspect that for your players, this not having the outlet of football this fall for the first time in their lives, and and since they were children, needs to be something that you pay close attention to as well, because as you said, athletes are creatures of habit and routine, and that routine's going to be gone. Can you talk a little bit about both the academic and the emotional support that exists for student athletes at UMaine?
Yeah, we have a number of programs and connections that we have, and Ryan Taylor, our head athletic trainer, does a great job lining up some of our mental health professionals that we have on campus that are specialists and can help these kids. As coaches, I think we have really, really strong relationships with our players. And so a lot of times we end up being involved, but, I'm not a professional. So a lot of times we, have really a method through Ryan to get to people over at Color, our health center, and dealing with the local hospitals as well, to set up any kind of, whether it be therapy or just talking to somebody. And I think mental health is one of those things that now it's becoming a little more acceptable to talk about. And our guys are human beings, and this is going to be a very taxing time. It's going to be a very difficult time, and they're going to have to work through this. And I end every email or meeting with just stay positive, and we're a family up here and we got each other's back. And I think that we do have the resources up here, and we take care of our guys, especially now, with anything they need. I think the majority of our players, and I don't want to speak for all of them, would feel comfortable coming forward to someone to talk about how they feel if they're struggling, but it's not 100%. And until it gets closer to that, I think everybody has a lot of work to do in that respect, because if we have a player on the team that's going through something and they can't go to anybody around them to talk about it, that's a failure on our part. And that's probably one of the things, again, in line with like players being the most important, that I personally take very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left, so just a reminder, if folks have questions, please enter them in the chat box. I'd like to move toward where you think UMaine football will be, say, in the next 5-10 years is probably too far out to really talk about. But what would you like, ideally, the conditions to be for UMaine football in 5 or 6 years, both from a programmatic standpoint, facility standpoint, and perhaps reputational?
We want to be nationally competitive. And like I alluded to earlier, we want to be consistent and be a playoff contender every single year. That takes a lot of work, and it definitely takes time, but that's something that we expect up here and our players expect. I think facility-wise, that goes hand in hand. Some of the improvements that I talked about earlier are things that I think are real and are very important to the direction of this program, and what we're going to need in the next 5 years. I think all of these things, every little thing goes hand in hand. And ultimately, if we're looking 5 years down the road, we need facility improvements. And I think we all know that. But we're trying to build a consistent national contender every single year. And that takes a lot of work by a lot of people. But I do believe we can do it. I think we have the people to do it. I'm in the short term, not to get off topic on your question, I'm really excited about our current roster, because we have some great seniors that are outstanding players and young men and excellent leaders. But we have this group of sophomores and juniors that have played so much football at the CAA level, and then the 2 FBS games we've played every year. They are extremely ready to take on the challenge of stepping up and being leaders on this team, just because they're so experienced. And to me, that gives you an opportunity to kind of mold your football team. And it's exciting. There's question marks all over the place, but at the same time, these guys have played and they've shown that they can do it. So in the immediacy, I'm excited. I just want to get out there and play a game. So whenever it's safe to do that, I'd like to do that with this team.
Yeah. I'd like to follow up on the point about playing FBS teams, because there are some financial incentives to play them, but there are also other valuable benefits to the program. Could you talk about why, when you're recruiting or when you're talking with donors or fans or just students, why that experience is so important to your program?
Well, through recruiting, it's really the biggest selling point in terms of, a lot of our guys want to play in the league afterwards. And to get the access to playing 2 FBS teams every year, it's a selling point. And that film is really, really important. We get every scout from every team that comes up here every single year because we have a number of guys that play in the NFL and the CFL. And it's really due to a lot of different factors, but one of them is they get that film. And so they can be judged off of that. Our best players, they tend to step up in those games. And, for us, the reason we do it, of course, it is budgetary and to make that money, but we have to make the best of the situation. And to me, it is a selling point. We ultimately go into those games looking to win. And we obviously won one 2 years ago that I was a part of as the offensive coordinator. Last year, we were in a 1-score game and then a 2-score game with 2 very, very good FBS football teams. But we look at it like we got to win those games. There's no difference in those games. And playing 2, certainly, if you don't win one, affects your ability to make the playoffs every year, because what a lot of other teams do is they schedule lower FCS leagues to play in replacement of that. So for us, we accept that challenge and go into those games knowing these are games we got to win. And I think our guys are highly motivated to do that. And, I treat those games exactly like we treat every single other one. And again, that's the win.
Mm-hmm. Very good. But we're about out of time, Coach. Is there anything else you'd like to share with Black Bear Nation before we wrap up?
No, I'm very appreciative that everybody's on the call, and I think our support has been excellent the last couple of years. And just to see where this program, and I've only been here for 6 years, but from the tailgating to the game day experience to our outreach to the community, it's really been very, very strong and improving. And I think being the flagship university of this state, and this is my home, my children were born here, and I'm very, very proud of what we're building here and take it very, very seriously. I just appreciate everybody who's been a part of this. And I think anybody that's a real fan or wants to be involved in our program is a part of our success as we move forward. And, we're working really, really hard through some very difficult times. And, we don't all know what the future is going to hold, but whatever it is, we're going to be ready for it. And when we're playing games again, we will be ready. So I appreciate everybody's support. I appreciate everybody's on this call. And I'm just excited about the direction. And honestly, I'm excited about getting our players back. I saw a few of our players the other day for the first time in a very long time. And it's great to be around them. They're outstanding young men. I'm very proud of them. And again, I'm just excited about the direction of this program. So we want to make everybody proud out there in Black Bear Nation. And, as the football program in the state of Maine, that's something that we all take very seriously as a staff. And I know our players do too. So again, I just appreciate everybody being on the call.
That's great. So we really appreciate everything you and your team is doing, and we look forward to seeing and supporting you and the student athletes who are part of the Black Bear football team as they work their way through this very unusual year coming ahead. All right. Thank you, Coach. And to everybody else who's been on the call, thank you for participating. We appreciate you taking part in this series that the Alumni Association is doing. We have another session coming up. Somebody else who, like Coach Charlton, has led groups to new heights. It will be Dr. Paul Majewski. This is on August 23rd, who led an expedition up Mount Everest. A little different from leading the team onto the field, but he will be talking about the expedition he led to Everest last year. It was the subject of a National Geographic documentary and also the subject of a special edition of National Geographic that came out in July. So everybody will be receiving an invitation about that coming up soon. So again, on behalf of the Alumni Association, thank you all. And again, thanks Coach Charlton for everything you're doing for UMaine. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.